and welcome to our session on our webinar on the BPhilMRes. I'm Professor Nick Mansfield. I'm the Dean of Higher Degree Research here at Macquarie University, and I'm responsible for the academic oversight of the BPhilMRes program. So what we plan for this evening is that I'll spend a little while just taking you through the outline of the program using the slides, and then after 15 minutes or so we'll be open for Q&A, and I'll say a little bit more about how that works when we get there. But if you do have questions, you're welcome to type them up at any time while I'm speaking, and we'll get around to answering them after I'm finished. So if you do think of anything, don't hesitate to type it in, and we'll get around to answering it at the end of the little presentation. Okay, so I'll start by just taking you through some of the basics about the BPhilMRes program. And firstly, most universities in Australia, in order to progress from undergraduate to PhD, you do a fourth add-on honours year. But for a long time, it's been recognised that that's not the best preparation for doing a PhD or any research-based program. And it's certainly not what's done at any other country overseas. So the standard international practice in almost every other country is that people go on from undergrad to PhD by doing a two-year master's program. So Macquarie broke with Australian practice a few years ago and became the first university in the country to adopt a two-year master's program as its normal pathway from undergraduate to PhD. It's got this hybrid name, the BPhilMRes, and that's to do with basically technical funding reasons, and I'll say a little bit more about that later. So the advantages of doing a two-year master's program on your way to PhD is, firstly, as I say, it's compatible with programs overseas, so it allows you to, it's a more portable qualification if you wanted to pursue further study internationally. It gives you a much more structured introduction to research. I mean, the primary function of the degree is to make people really well equipped before they go on into the PhD, and so it gives you a much more solid basis for that. And in so doing, it will allow you to complete your PhD in a much shorter time. Some people have taken a very long time, even 6-10 years to complete their PhD, and we believe that that's largely because they weren't adequately prepared before going on. And it also gives you a much more robust, deep knowledge of your academic discipline. So that will allow you to make really informed decisions about the area in which you want to research, and it'll give you a much more confident grasp of your own academic area. And because a master's program is proving to be more popular, it means you'll be in a larger cohort than you would have been in most honours programs, where enrolments can be very low, and that gives you a greater sense of support and solidarity between students. So those are some of the many advantages of undertaking this kind of program in preference to the shorter honours program. Okay, the program is offered in two identical forms, and that basically means it's one program, but it has two names, and the names are different for international students and for domestic students. And as I mentioned, that's to do with the funding arrangement. And the first year of the program for domestic students is given the name BPhil, and that's because the Australian government, which puts in place funding arrangements for these programs, recognises that as an advanced undergraduate year, and it's funded accordingly, which means that students basically accrue a HECS liability, as they do for their undergraduate programs, on more or less the same terms, and they have the same entitlements as regular undergraduate students. The second year of the program is funded differently for domestic students. It's funded on the Australian government's research training scheme, and the students enrolled under the research training scheme, the fees are actually paid by the government, and so they accrue no debt or liability, and there's no fee payment. International students are enrolled in a completely different manner and are fully fee paying, and so the program for international students is simply called the MRes for both years. Okay, so the structure of the program. The first year of the program is at the same academic level as honours, and it's made up of 8 coursework units. One of those units is called Research Communications, and that's taught centrally, and the aim of that is to give you a really solid grasp of not just of academic writing in general, you're familiar with that from writing undergraduate essays, but exactly how research is communicated in its various written forms, but also in conference presentation, multimedia, internet, social media, and so on, and other ways in which research is disseminated. You'll also do a faculty or department-based unit called Research Frontiers. And the aim of that unit is to give you an understanding of what the latest areas of research, what the new exciting topics and controversies are in your particular academic discipline. So you'll be able to make informed choices about what the most innovative, cutting-edge topics would be for you to undertake your research. And then on top of that, you would do 6 faculty or department-based coursework units. And they're administered slightly differently from one faculty to another, but their fundamental aim is to give you a really solid, high-level basis of knowledge of your academic discipline and from a research perspective. Second year of the program is built fundamentally around the production of a 20,000-word thesis, and that's a research topic that you determine for yourself in consultation with staff members in your department. And all of the activities in that second year are designed in order to support and structure the way you undertake that thesis. So you do another Research Frontiers unit, but this time it's focused much more precisely on the subdisciplinary area, the really immediate context of your own individual research project. And then you'll also do either workshops or some kind of class-based program around how a literature review is done by researchers in your discipline, aspects of research methodology that are relevant, not just in general, but to your particular project. And then you'll do some work on research planning and project management. And all of those activities are really fundamentally parts of the thesis that you will produce at the end of that year. Okay, admission requirements to the program. They're basically equivalent to the honours program. This is for people coming into the first year of the program. So you would normally be expected to have a GPA of 2.5. Macquarie operates on a 4-point GPA scale, and some other universities in the country use a 7-point scale, but Macquarie uses a 4-point scale. And we're expecting a basic average somewhere between pass and credit. And that's for your GPA overall through your entire undergraduate degree, or of a credit average of 3 out of 4 at 300 level, or the immediate year before you gain admission into the program. Now, there are some disciplinary variations. Some disciplines expect a higher GPA, and some will expect other evidence of capability, portfolios, or some evidence of earlier work. And you need to get that information fairly exactly from the department in which you're intending to enroll. Okay, but a lot of people are interested in entering the program who are further advanced, have done more than an undergraduate degree. They might have done honours, or they might have done a coursework master's degree, either at Macquarie or elsewhere. And most people who've completed an honours year or a coursework master's program who are intending to study in the same, continue in the same academic discipline would be given credit for the first year of the program and be able to go directly into the second year. There will be some case-by-case evaluation, so that's not absolutely guaranteed for everybody, but the normal process would be for people who've completed another program to go straight into the second year and go straight into the research thesis. Okay, a little bit about our exchange program. Macquarie is actually the largest player in what's called the co-tutel or joint PhD. And a co-tutel PhD is where you enroll in a PhD at 2 universities simultaneously. You do one PhD, but you're enrolled at 2 universities and you spend half your time at each. And so half the time you'd be here at Macquarie with us, and then half the time you'd be at a partner institution. And we have arrangements. It's over 100 universities in 30 countries. We've had over 260 people undertake co-tutel PhDs. And our hope is that more and more students will do that, because that's a very enriching experience in the PhD. And in order to prepare you for that, we've also developed exchange programs in the MRes and in both years of the MRes, and the BPhil and the MRes phase of the programs. And our hope would be that you would spend some time overseas during this degree, and that would help you build relationships and networks in labs or in departments internationally that you would then allow you to prepare to do a co-tutel PhD further down the track. Okay, now a little bit about the fees and scholarships that we offer, and they differ quite significantly between domestic students and international students. So I'll talk a little bit first about the situation for domestic students. As I mentioned, in terms of fee liability, domestic students will enrol under the HEX scheme and on Commonwealth supported places, and so will accrue that liability over the year just as they would in undergraduate coursework programs. But they will also receive a stipend, and the stipend is $8,000 over the year, and it's allocated in two tranches. So if you're still enrolled at the HEX census date, which is at the end of March in the first semester, you'll be given a payment of $4,000. And similarly, in the second semester, the census date is at the end of August, and you'll receive another $4,000 payment. Now, as I mentioned, when you move into the second year, domestic students are then funded on a different program, and that's the Commonwealth Government's Research Training Scheme. And as I mentioned, the Research Training Scheme, under the Research Training Scheme, domestic students don't either accrue a HEX liability and they don't pay fees. The fees are paid partly, but mostly by the government, but also by the university, and so it's effectively free for domestic students. But in the scholarship arrangement in the second year is different to the first year, and on a competitive basis, the university will award a significant number of scholarships for high-performing students based on their results in the first year or on their results in the year that they used for their admission qualification into the second year. And those scholarships are significantly higher. They're set at the Australian Government Postgraduate Research Award rate, which is currently $27,000. It's indexed, so it increases every year, and that's a tax-free stipend, and that's the equivalent to the stipend that you would be getting if you enrolled, if you were awarded a scholarship in a PhD program. For international students, as I mentioned, the financial situation is different. International students would normally be paying tuition fees for their enrolment in both years of the program. But it is possible for international students in the second year to apply through our international scholarship round. If they apply for admission to the PhD, but are then asked to do the second year of the MRes before going on into the PhD, they can be awarded a scholarship to cover living expenses in the second year of the program and their fees in the second year of the program. And the scholarship stipend rate that they would receive for living allowances is equivalent to the one that I mentioned earlier. It's currently $27,000 and that's paid on a fortnightly basis. It is also possible through a variety of international funding agencies run by overseas governments who provide scholarships for their students to study internationally, to also use, Macquarie's negotiated that they can also use some of those scholarship packages to cover the second year of the program. Okay, and then the transition from MRes on into the PhD. Macquarie runs a 3-year PhD program. That's our normal expected length of candidature. And we will require that all students going into that program have either the MRes or an equivalent research-based master's degree. If you gain a score of 75 in the second year of the program, and 90% of that grade is determined by the result awarded for your thesis after external examination, you will be able to go directly into the PhD if there is supervision available for you in the department. The department will make an assessment about whether they have supervisor capacity for you, but normally if you've completed the second year of the program successfully and gained a score of over 75, you'll be able to go on directly into the PhD. And as I mentioned, high-performing students will be awarded a large number of, there will be a large number of scholarships available for high-performing students to cover their living costs. Okay, and finally, just a little bit about the quality of the support that we offer in the PhD. We have about 2,000 PhD students here at Macquarie, and we offer a fairly wide-ranging program to guarantee that their experience is really positive. And we have a learning skills program that provides academic support, especially in the area of writing for HDR candidates, to make sure that their communication skills and their skills in preparing and presenting a thesis are at a really appropriate high level. We also have a professional skills program. We're mindful that a high proportion of PhD graduates don't stay in universities. Many don't want to stay in universities. They want to pursue careers outside in industry, in government, in the health sector, or in other fields of education. So we provide a program that develops their job preparation skills and job application skills so that they're really well developed and prepared for alternative career paths once they leave the university. And we're also aware that one thing that PhD students need above all is a sense of community and solidarity. Doing a PhD can be it's a very challenging and can be an isolating experience. So we provide a peer-to-peer program of support which allows students to get together to share ideas about their research, but also to provide support for one another and all the issues that arise in developing a PhD program. And I should have mentioned we also have a high-quality supervision program where we require all our supervisors to be up to speed with the latest research in the area of supervision and to be well equipped and supported in the mentoring and advice that they give to PhD candidates. We're very happy with the student feedback that we've received. Over 90% of our candidates report that they're satisfied or very satisfied with their experience here at Macquarie, and especially with their relationship with their supervisor. And we also provide various forms of research funding. Within your department, there'll be funding available for the costs of your research, especially if you're doing expensive lab work or field work. And we also have a centrally organised fund where it's possible for HDR candidates to apply for up to $5,000 at some point in their candidature to attend an international conference or to travel overseas to visit labs, archives, or other appropriate research areas. So we do provide a very strong and supportive program in the PhD. But we are aware, of course, that a lot of people who would be interested in doing the MRes are not necessarily ready to go on to a PhD and may not be intending to do that at any other time. And we certainly see the program as providing a very strong basis for the kinds of skills in independent work, in research, in communication, in investigation, and in project management that are increasingly important across a whole wide range of industries. Okay, well, that's probably enough kind of general. Oh, whoops, one thing I forgot to mention, of course, very important practical details, application deadlines. The application deadlines are relatively early for international students in particular, and some of that's set by constraints. International students need to apply to the Australian government for visas. That's a process that's outside of our control, and that it can take, especially in some countries, it can take quite a while for visas to be processed. So we're very keen to receive applications early. If you're an international student and you're interested in applying for the scholarship support that the university provides, that's only for the second year of the program, but we are aware a lot of candidates from overseas in particular have already undertaken a master's degree and will be going on directly into the second year. They would need to get their applications in by the 31st of July. International students who are interested in going on only in enrolment and not in the scholarship, and that would include all who intend to go into the first year of the program, are able to apply by the 31st of August. Domestic students, of course, don't have the same constraint about visa deadlines, and we will be accepting applications from them up to the end of October in 2016. But do feel free, you can apply at any time, and it's certainly worth consulting with the department or faculty in which you intend to enrol, and getting onto that application process fairly soon. It's quite a detailed application form that you need to complete, so make sure you give yourself plenty of time to discuss it with academic advisors in your department and to prepare everything that you need to, think through everything that you need to do in order to apply. And on the screen you can see the where the link to the application forms is and any more information that you would need about the application process. Okay, that's, I think, all. I better double check. Yes, that's all from me. And now a little bit about what we're going to do now. We have two other staff members available, Jennifer and Sally, who'll be able to provide written answers to your questions. you'll be able to see your questions as you type them in, but you won't be able to see anyone else's questions until they're answered, and they'll all appear up on your screen. I'll be also answering some questions that have been being sent through to me. They're really difficult ones, apparently, which I'm very grateful. And one more thing, we'll be trying not to answer duplicate questions. So if you've asked a question and you don't receive an answer, just scroll up or down the screen and you might find that it's more or less been answered previously. Okay, so I'll get on and answer a couple of the questions that we've already received. We've got one from Genevieve, who's asked, does the increase in number of participants of the MRes mean less one-on-one interaction? I don't think that's the case. I mean, I think you'll find that most departments are very focused on supporting research students. They're very well aware from their own experience of what a challenging thing it can be to undertake a research degree. And they're also very aware that the research that's undertaken by masters, MRes and PhD students is some of the most significant work that the university does. It's a major contribution to the university's offering to the society. You've got to remember that the university's 40% of the university's work is dedicated to research, and about half of that research is done by research students. So research students are hugely important to the university, and they're hugely important to individual academics. So I don't hear reports about any decline in the quality of interaction between staff and students, but that will vary a lot between department and department and between individuals as well. So but certainly that's not been a problem that I've been aware of. Okay, we have another question from John, who says, I have a master's degree executive. Would I qualify for entry into the MRes? Can't see the whole question, so I don't know if it's possible for me to see. Let's just click on that and see if that will expand. Okay, sorry. I have a master's degree executive. Will I qualify for entry into the MRes? My entry into this master's was by completing a graduate certificate followed by a graduate diploma. Normally what we look at is the highest level of qualification that you've done prior to entering the MRes program. If you've completed a master's degree and your results are at that credit average or above, we would normally, we would look at the scale of any research project you might have done. Normally in most master's programs, the project is about a quarter of the degree, and we don't consider that sufficient to allow you to bypass the MRes, but normally it would mean direct admission into the second year of the MRes, so you would begin the research project straight away. One other thing I probably should mention about the MRes, and one thing that we structured into it to make sure that it's a good preparation for your PhD, is that we hope and expect that the project that you start in the second year of the MRes will be the first phase of the project that you go on to do in your PhD. It'll be a kind of pilot study, so a lot of the preparation work, background reading, thinking about methodology and so on that you'd need to do in the PhD is already well underway in the second year of the MRes, so you're really well prepared by the time you actually enroll in the PhD. So it's very important that if you haven't done a really major research project, if you've just done an honours degree or another kind of master's degree, that you get that really solid introduction preparation, that first phase of the project you'll go on to doing the PhD. So John, yes, normally what would be seen with someone who's done a master's degree would be that they would go on into the second year, but that does need to be assessed on a case-by-case basis, so the faculty would have to have a closer look at exactly what you've done. Okay, our next question is from Tobias. Is it possible to study the MRes part-time? Yes, it is possible to do the MRes part-time, but I should have mentioned or made clear during my presentation that the stipends are only available to people who are undertaking the program full-time, and that basically means, for example, in the first year of the program, that in order to complete the whole of the first year of the program, you undertake 8 units. To be considered as a full-time student, you need to be enrolled in 3/4 of that program, so that's 6 units. So if you do 6 units or more, you'll be deemed to be full-time, and the stipends will be available for you. But we are aware, of course, that there are a lot of people who have other responsibilities, family, care responsibilities, work commitments, health issues and so on, who aren't able to study full-time. So it is possible to complete the program part-time over 18 months, over 2 years, or even more flexible. So that's no problem. It's also true in the second year of the program, it's possible to undertake your research project part-time as well. Okay, our next question is from Yaya. How is the MRes at Macquarie different from a Master of Philosophy offered by most other universities, ANU for example? The Master of Philosophy is normally a research degree, and Macquarie also offers the Master of Philosophy. It's a research degree that's of the same type as a PhD, but it's on a smaller scale. It's shorter, and usually the admission requirements are slightly lower than for the PhD. And in order to gain admission to a Master of Philosophy, either here at Macquarie or elsewhere, you do need to undertake the normal research training preparation pathway, so honours at other universities, but for us, the MRes. So the MRes would still be the degree that you'd have to do in order to get into a Master of Philosophy, but it's the entry requirement is a score of 65 rather than 75 for the PhD. So it is quite significant. There's usually no coursework in an MPhil, and but if you've completed an MPhil, then you wouldn't be required to do the MRes with us. That would gain you direct admission into our PhD program. But in terms of structure, it is very different it's very different to the MRes. The MRes is a combination of coursework, research training, and a thesis, whereas the MPhil is just a thesis. Okay, a question from Michelle. Are there many MRes students in the education field? I don't have the figures with me at the moment, but certainly we do have a strong MRes program in education. And education is an area that attracts a lot of people in mid-career. So there are fewer people going on into that program who are going straight from their undergraduate degree. And of course, that's because there are so many people working in the educational field who decide that they're interested in further study or in researching education. So, yep, we do have a large number of people who go into, who are doing the MRes in that area, especially in the second year of the program, because a lot of them have already done earlier master's qualifications. Our next question is from Elizabeth Bennett, very literary name. I am averaging a distinction at the moment, worried I may drop to a credit average. Will this be taken into account when applying for the MRes? If so, will a credit average be sufficient? Yes, normally a credit average would be fine. A credit on a 4-point scale is 3. So if you have an average of 3 at 300 level, then you would meet the entry requirements for the MRes, for the BPhilMRes. And in fact, the expectation of your the expectation for your whole degree program is slightly lower than that. It's 2.5. So if you've got a distinction average, it sounds like if you're getting credits now, your GPA will still be high on our scale, well above 3. So that should be fine. But you would need to check. You haven't said exactly what discipline you're in. There are a couple of disciplines, actuarial studies, for example, that does expect a higher GPA than the standard university admission. Universities have that prerogative. Okay. Next question is from Genevieve. How is the degree structured? Does it use a similar format to that of an undergraduate in which you can choose any number of unit subjects, or is it quite rigid in structure? As I mentioned, the first year of the program is given over to 8 units of study, 8 coursework units, 6 of which are based in your academic discipline. They're electives in your academic discipline. It does vary quite a bit across the faculties. Some faculties adopt a fairly a more structured approach, so that they do have faculty-based units. For example, in the Faculty of Business and Economics, all first-year students are required to do units in qualitative and quantitative methodology, and they're designed to really give you the skills for research when you go on into the second year. And there are still a number of electives on the side that you're free to choose from a range of courses across disciplinary areas. Other faculties are a bit more flexible than that, and you have a much freer choice about the units that you choose to study, and some are in between. So it's probably worth checking with your department, at least with their websites, to find out exactly what structure they adopt. But there is a real flexibility in the program, and basically you do enroll in a discipline or department, but you are able, if it's supported by academic advisors in your department, you are actually able to put together a program from units across the university. And it is technically possible for you to do units from every faculty. You do need to get, an important proviso there is you do need to get academic sign-off on that. So you would need somebody who was an academic advisor in your department who did agree that that was the appropriate program for you. And you would need to meet any prerequisite requirements that there were in the particular units you wanted to do in different faculties, but it is technically possible to do. For example, it would be possible, we had a student working on computer gaming who was doing units in computing in the Faculty of Science, also doing units in multimedia in the Faculty of Arts, units in business and marketing, in business and economics, and I think they were also doing a unit in psychology. So they were basically studying in 4 out of our 5 faculties. So it is possible to put together that kind of program, but it's not a completely open slather. You do have to coordinate that with, you do have to make sure that someone believes that that's the appropriate structured program for you. Next question is from Phoebe. If you complete your MRes and are accepted to do a PhD, can you defer the PhD offer without any penalty, loss of scholarship opportunities? It is the normal thing that we would expect is that if you do not intend to take up your PhD immediately, and a lot of people don't, I mean, doing the MRes project can be quite exhausting, and some people have gone straight on from high school into undergrad and then into the BPhilMRes, so they want a little bit of a break before they go on. We'd probably want you to apply and enroll at a later date, and you'd be subject when you're ready to commence, and the conditions about scholarships and so on that are applicable at that time would be the ones that would be appropriate for you. Certainly we've had a lot of people who are taking a little bit of time before deciding to go on, and that's probably a pretty healthy thing to do. A PhD project is pretty, it's a huge commitment, and it can be stressful, and you certainly want to have high levels of energy ready for doing that. Okay, next question is from Narlin. Do we get assistance in submitting a research proposal when applying for the MRes? Yes, normally you would be doing your research proposal in conjunction with your prospective supervisors. If you're in the first year of the program, you'd be starting conversations about that September, perhaps in the first year of the program, developing ideas about where you want to research, talking to people who might be your supervisors, and working on the research proposal together. If you're going straight into the second year of the program because you've already done a master's somewhere else or an honours degree somewhere else, then you would want to be doing that again fairly early, at some stage while you're preparing your application in the previous year. Enrolment for the research year of the MRes starts from the beginning of January, and so we do want people. That's unlike most, say, undergraduate programs where classes would normally start at the end of February, and that's because we want to give people plenty of time to work on their research projects before they complete them. They're due in October, so. Certainly, especially for people who want to do field work or need to do an ethics application or are doing elaborate lab work, we really want to give them the maximum amount of time. So the earlier you get on into preparing your research proposal, the better. And certainly you'll be doing that in conjunction with your prospective supervisor. You'll be drafting things, talking to them about what's possible, about whether your topic's too narrow, too broad, and so on, and getting advice and support in doing that. Okay. Next question is from Phoebe. Can you specify which particular disciplines require a higher GPA to be accepted into the MRes? I'm interested in pursuing an MRes in the Department of Biology. I can't give you a full list of the departments that do require a higher GPA, but that should be available either on their website, or each department has a clearly indicated MRes director who you could email, who'd be more than happy to provide you with that information. Just on my memory, I don't think the Department of Biology requires a different GPA, but certainly confirm that with them before, and they'd be able to provide you with any information that you might need. Of course, some departments are more flexible about that, especially we're aware that some students have performed very well in the discipline that they intend to go on studying, but they might have not done so well in another discipline where they started, or that they lost interest in, or it wasn't appropriate for them. So what really counts is the quality of your performance in the discipline that you intend to concentrate on in the degree. Another question from Phoebe. Can you please clarify the fees for the second year of the MRes? I gathered that from what you said that it's funded by the government's research training scheme and that there would be no fees accrued from this. That's right. The second year of the MRes is funded in the same way that MPhil and PhD candidature is funded. So for domestic students, domestic Australian students, there is no HECS liability and there are no fees. The government funds the university via what's called the Research Training Scheme, and the university provides a significant amount of resources of its own in order to fund and support PhD students and also second-year MRes students. You probably remember that a couple of years ago, when Tony Abbott was Prime Minister, there were moves to reform the funding of university students in general, and included in those proposals was a plan to charge fees for domestic PhD students. The universities were very strongly opposed to that, and of course that did not pass the parliament, so that hasn't been implemented, and I don't think either of the parties in this coming election are intending to do that, though I can't guarantee that they never will further down the track. But currently the Australian government does support domestic Australian students to undertake research degrees, so the second year of the MRes plus MPhil or PhD, and that means you don't pay HECS and you don't pay any fees, so it's free basically. Okay, next question from Braden. What if my GPA is not high enough or I'm not accepted into the program? Are there courses or units I can sit so that I can eventually undertake an MRes? I think probably in that case what you'd need to look at doing is certainly discussing that with the department and whether they could design a program for you that they would see as acceptable preparation for you to go on into the MRes. If, for example, your GPA is only marginally below what the entry requirement is, and if, as I mentioned, it's pulled down by scores you got in subjects that aren't directly relevant to what you're intending to study in the MRes, or they're really a long time ago, they might be subjects you did in the first year of your program, then they might be prepared to support you and make a case to the administration to allow you to go on. But there's no guarantees. I mean, the GPA requirement is our fundamental entry requirement. So normally we are looking at it as some kind of guarantee of your ability and aptitude for undertaking this degree. But if you're only marginally missing out, it might be worth talking to departments and seeing if they're prepared to help you and support you in building up your case for admission a bit further down the track. Okay, any other questions? I'm more than happy to hear about. If there's anything that I mentioned earlier on that people aren't clear on, I'm more than happy to repeat or to clarify. We've got another question from Deborah. If I want to study an MRes in Indigenous education globally, do I apply through education or the Indigenous faculty? Look, that's a really interesting question, certainly a really interesting topic. I think what you'd want to do in that case is really just start discussions with either of those departments and see what their advice is. It might depend on exactly what the focus of your research and study actually is. For example, if you're working very closely with Indigenous communities here or in a very strongly Australian context, it might be more appropriate for you to be approaching that through the education experts in Indigenous studies. But if you're taking a broader approach that might be more strongly informed by research in educational studies, then it might be better to come through that angle. Of course, it's always possible to do a program that's designed between departments. So what I'd suggest doing is having a quick look at some of the researchers in those individual departments and see if there's anybody who's close to your particular interests, because they might be the most logical person. But certainly there wouldn't be any obstacle in you putting together a program either in the coursework phase or in the research phase that's between those two departments. And there are other departments, of course, anthropology, sociology, that might also have offerings that are going to be relevant or interesting to you. But start somewhere, so choose one of those departments and start a conversation with either the MRes director or a particular researcher, and they'd be able to give you, it might take a little bit of time, but you'll be able to put together a program that is tailored towards your interests. Next question is from Margaret. How do students find a supervisor for their research project? Basically, if you're enrolled in the first year of the program, you would be in discussions with your department as the first year progresses, especially towards the end of that year, about possible supervisors. And what they would want from you is some clear indication of exactly what area you're intending to focus on. And of course, it would really help them if you'd done a bit of research on the researchers in your department and found out whose work was most closely relevant to yours and perhaps talking to them about it. They might, if you've been a Macquarie student before, they might be people that you're familiar with from earlier courses that you've done, that you've had as teachers or that you've heard give lectures and so on. So certainly the department will be working on assigning supervisors for people in the program towards the end of the first year. If you're coming from the outside, again, it helps if you have a look. There's fairly comprehensive information on the web about the research interests and the research outputs, the kinds of publications that have come from staff members. And you can contact them directly or the MRes director in the relevant department, and they will put you in touch with them, and you can start negotiating about who might be the appropriate supervisor. But certainly you're given advice and support and suggestions will be made about who's going to be the best person for you. Okay, we have a question from Vashi. How many hours of effort is required for the full-time course per week? The normal expected load is for a full-time candidate Well, normally completing the first year of the program, the coursework year of the program, in um, in 1 year, you would be doing 8 units or 4 units in each semester. Each of those units is 4 credit points, I think, and you work on an expectation that each credit point is 3 hours of work per week. So it is up to 48 hours of work per week, but that will vary according to what assignments are due at any particular time. So it is a fairly demanding workload, and we to be honest, we have had feedback from students who have found the workload quite demanding. So it is really important for people to understand the kind of commitment they're making in this program. Again, to be, as I mentioned earlier, to be recognised as a full-time student, you need to be undertaking 3/4 of that complete program. So it would be possible for you still to be a full-time student and doing only 3 units in each semester, and so the workload would be reduced accordingly. But of course, that means you would take extra time to complete it, probably up to 18 months in order to complete it. And that's the kind of decision you need to make for yourself. I don't think it's a bad idea to take a bit longer and to be able to give more time to your work and not rush through it. But of course, people have different priorities, and a lot of people are keen on getting their study advanced as quickly as they can. So you'd need to make a decision about your other commitments and how much time you wanted to give yourself in order to complete the program satisfactorily. So yeah, but normally if you're doing the complete program within a year, the workload is relatively heavy. Second year of the program is less structured. It's not unitized, so you're not doing it on the unit structure, but so it does depend on you're designing your own individual research project. It's staged and structured by your faculty and department, so it will there will be tasks that you need to undertake and deadlines that you will need to meet. But a lot of the deadlines that you'll be working on for your own project will be ones that you set yourself, because it's a project that you've designed and that you're completing on your own with guidance and support. But basically you could be designing your own schedule, and so that might give you more flexibility in how you manage it. But certainly undertaking a research project is a relatively demanding thing time-wise. Okay, next question is from Samuel. If I'm an international student and would like to conduct the research in my home country, is it allowed? Yes, it is possible for you to undertake your research not only in your home country, but wherever might be appropriate. So there could be people who are undertaking field research in any number of disciplines in different places around the world or around Australia, so that is possible. But of course it needs to be approved and planned very carefully, because there will be there will be certain requirements that you would need to meet here. For example, in the second year of the program, most faculties expect candidates to do at least one significant presentation at some stage in the year. That might be possible to do remotely via Skype or whatever, but that will be up to the individual departments. So it will add extra questions to you in your planning, but of course it is possible to undertake research. If the appropriate place for you to do your research is overseas or somewhere else in Australia, then of course that is possible for you to do, no problem. Okay, I'll just scroll down and see if there are any more questions for me at the moment. Yep, the next one is from Nalin. Is there an increasing demand for PhDs in the finance area? My background is not in finance, so I'm a bit cautious about answering that question. But certainly if you wanted to speak to academic advisors in finance, they might be able to give you really exact information about that. I actually did have a conversation when I was overseas a little while ago with someone working in the finance area in New York, and And he did say that that was one area in which PhD graduates were relatively common, in contrast to some other business and economics fields. And I think that's because increasingly many fields require, not just in the kind of business and economics area, but many employers are really looking for people with the kinds of skills that you get in a research program, the ability to work independently, to design projects, to undertake projects independently, to identify significant problems and questions, and to project manage a solution and to bring it home within a relatively tight framework. Independent work, ability to find out information, ability to manage information, to communicate information, those are the skills you get in any research training program. So certainly in the MRes, but in the PhD as well. And so they do really prepare you well for the kinds of flexible workplaces and work practices that you get these days. So yes, I would think it probably is an area in which there is a relatively high demand for the kind of specialist knowledge you get in a PhD, and the kind of innovative knowledge as well. Because I think in finance, people are constantly looking for new algorithms and new possible methodologies and products. So I think having that kind of really deep knowledge of the discipline and background in independent thinking and innovation and imagination could be really, really helpful. But I would suggest you probably get in touch with people in the discipline, give you more exact advice about that. Okay, Avashi has got a question. What are my career options after completing 2 years of the MRes program if I do not want to pursue a PhD? That, of course, does depend on the academic field in which you're working and or in which you're seeking employment. But certainly there are some disciplines where the graduates, MRes graduates, are less interested in going on into the PhD and are really keen to do this smaller scale research degree. Biology is an area that comes to mind. I know is a field in which a lot of candidates undertaking the MRes program don't intend to do PhDs, but they do want to have the kinds of strong research skills and project completion skills that a degree like this would give. So it does, as I mentioned earlier, I do think that the kinds of things employers are currently looking for in terms of your independence, your ability to solve problems, answer questions, even identify what questions and problems and issues there are in a certain field. I do think, and then come up with an answer and communicate it really effectively. I think that's what you get from this kind of degree, and I think they're increasingly the skills that are in demand by employers. Genevieve, another question. What makes the other master's degrees, what makes the MRes better than other master's degrees or honours programs? Many international universities expect honours to be completed before entry into further research. I'm not sure if that's actually true in the second half of what you say. In fact, very few overseas universities recognise an honours degree for admission into PhD programs. In fact, I don't know of any that would accept an honours degree as admission into a PhD. And that's been one reason why it's long been talked about in Australia that we need to move away from the honours degree towards the 2-year master's programs, because it's simply not possible for Australian honours graduates to go on into the PhD without starting again and doing a master's degree overseas. What makes the MRes better? Almost every university in Australia, or almost everyone that I've spoken to, people in my position, for example, around the country, believe that a master's degree is a much stronger preparation for advancing into a PhD. The honours program is effectively, it's called an honours year, but it's effectively about 8 or 9 months long. And it simply doesn't provide the scale of experience of your academic discipline, the depth and breadth of study in your academic discipline, in order to inform you enough to make strategic choices about research, or even to be very confident about your knowledge of your academic discipline at a high level. and the research project you do in an honours program is not on a significant enough scale. In a lot of areas, it's really just a long essay, and that doesn't provide you with the research skills that you're going to need in order to go on into the PhD. Certainly, the feedback we're getting is that people we've had in previous cohorts who've completed the MRes are much better prepared and much more confident when they go on into the PhD than honours graduates were. One of the problems we've had with honours graduates in the past is that they flounder when they enter the PhD and spend a year developing their research project, or even just getting over the emotional shock of working on their own, and that doesn't help their confidence and doesn't make them happy people, and it certainly it delays them in completing their projects. So certainly we believe, and we think it's backed up by the fact that every other country in the world does it, and I'd say that pretty much the consensus around the country is that a two-year master's is a much better preparation for PhD. The government recently did a review of research training in Australia and came to the same conclusion that Australian universities really should adopt a two-year master's program, because it's a much more substantial, robust preparation for research later on. Okay, a question from Catherine. Are we only able to submit one application for one discipline? For example, I'm in the sociology faculty. Am I able to submit an application for anthropology as well to see which one I get into? Or am I only able to submit one? So, normally you'd only submit one application, but I might have to take that question on notice and hand that over to the administration office and see if they can give you a more exact answer. But probably you would want to be in conversations with both departments about which one is more keen on accepting your candidature, or you might want to talk to them about putting together a combined program between both. But certainly, I would do one application, but indicate at some stage that you would be wanting to have your application considered by more than one department. Question from Anne. Are there any written guidelines which clarify whether a candidate should do a Master of Research or a Master of Philosophy? Basically, in order to get into the Master of Philosophy at Macquarie, the MPhil, you do need to have done the MRes or equivalent. The MPhil is at the same stage as the PhD, so it's a research degree and purely a research degree. And so in order to be admitted to the MPhil, you do have to have done, at Macquarie, you do have to have done the MRes or an equivalent master's degree. I would personally, normally the people who are undertaking an MPhil, as I said, we have about 2,000 PhD students, and we have a very small number. They're about 95% of our research students, and about 5% are doing the Master of Philosophy. And normally those are people who wanted to do a PhD, didn't quite meet the entry requirement, and so are doing the MPhil as a kind of conditional entry staging into the PhD, because it is possible to upgrade from an MPhil into a PhD. The admission requirement for the MPhil is lower, than for the PhD. So normally you would, but certainly I would argue that the MRes is by far a better preparation for PhD, because it does give you that strong structured coursework component, as well as providing you with a more structured and supported introduction to research as you progress. Okay, it's getting up towards 7 o'clock, and at this stage I don't know if there are any more questions. So we are coming to the end of our session, but of course it is possible for you to, if you have any further questions, don't hesitate to send an email to postgraduate@mq.edu.au, or else go on the Macquarie website and go to the HDR office, search for research training, or simply go to the Higher Degree Research website, and there's lots of information there and links there about the program, about the application process, and ways of submitting further questions. The camera's about to go off, but we do have a survey just in response to tonight's event, and so we'll still be online for a little bit longer, for up to 30 minutes, I think it is. And so do please do the survey. Okay, thank you very much, everybody. Don't hesitate to submit any further questions that you might have. But otherwise, thanks again.